That's who you're talking about. Okay. And again, according to verse 6 in chapter 1, what did those that didn't return, what did they then? They were asked to do it, but look in verse 6 and we'll see if they actually did it. Verse 6. And all those who were around them meaning, in other words, the other people who were there that didn't go back, encouraged them with articles of silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with precious things besides all that was willingly offered. So, free will offering. They weren't forced to give. They were asked to give, and they did. Apparently did very, very well. So, you got kind of an interesting situation here. In Exodus, pretty much all of them left because their lives were in danger basically if they didn't. In this case, some of them decided to stay. But the ones that decided to stay helped them out, which also was similar to Exodus as far as the Egyptians actually helped them out in Exodus. Okay. King Cyrus, he made his own contribution. He did something that was kind of the opposite of what happened to him on Babylon. When they were captured by Nebuchadnezzar robbed their temple and used the articles in ways that wasn't supposed to be used. I'll put it that way. Took the articles from the temple and used it for his own parties, essentially. So what does Cyrus do? He gives them all back.
He let a lot of you talk about Babylon and Cyrus there, a lot of them would just about relieve all the people that they captured, but that's just like nowadays, you take different countries fighting now, but Cyrus will let you come and live and do what you can do to help the economy.
Exactly.
A lot of countries would do
that. You're exactly right. Let's look at what actually transpires here. Look at verse 8. Well, first, starting with verse 7. King Cyrus also brought out the articles of the house of the Lord, that which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from Jerusalem, and put them in the temple of the gods. I mean, that's a little g, not a big G. And Cyrus, king of Persia, brought them out of the treasury by the hand of, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name. Okay. Sounds good to me. That was his treasurer. So basically Cyrus said it is okay for you to take these out. The treasurer, Persian treasurer, takes them and he gives them to this guy. I'm going to take a shot at it. Sheshbazzar? Sheshbazzar? Okay. Again, I'm probably butchering that. Now, the interesting thing is, who exactly is that? Let's read. It calls him, in verse 8, the Prince of Judah. Okay? Now, that's what it calls him. And the interesting thing is, that word prince basically just means a leader. So he was a leader of Judah, but they're not really sure just what kind of leader he was. Okay? Historians aren't. He could have been a prince, a ruler, a leader, or whatever, but they're not really sure. And
Maybe
we're going to come back. Pardon?
Maybe several of them.
So
Somebody leads one group, another prince leads another.
We're going to come back later to this guy. We'll refer to him. But it has to do with who was actually the leader who led them out of Persia? Led them back to the homeland. This guy's brought up as a name that he is a leader. The treasures from the temple are given to him to take care of. But we don't see a whole lot about him in the future. So, don't really know a lot about who he is.
James?
Yes?
It's also, I was reading, it's also thought that this was like Daniel having a second name and that this was Zerubbabel.
That is a theory that's been thrown out. Yes. It's just a theory, so that's why I didn't go too far with it and so forth, because there's really no way of proving it.
Well, and I know this is getting ahead, but in chapter 5, it does mention him twice. Once in verse 14 as being named governor, appointed as governor by Cyrus himself. And then in verse 16 it says that he, Sheshbazzar, was the one who laid the foundation of the temple, and it lay in ruins. And so, yes, it kind of lends to that theory of being Zerubbabel, since Zerubbabel was the one that led him back and was kind of in control of it.
That does lead to that theory. The only problem with that, according to Cyrus, he's the one that did all these other things too, but yet he himself didn't do it. So sometimes they're given credit for stuff that they didn't really do. They just were the ones that somebody had to have credit for it. So anyway, so it's a really kind of a little bit of a mystery exactly who this guy is. All right, but we won't stay there, and we'll move on. Now, look at the list in verses 9 and 10 of the articles that were given. Bunch of stuff here. This is the number of them: 30 gold platters, 1,000 silver platters, 29 knives. By the way, does anybody have a different word in there for the knives? Pardon? Cans?
Mine said censor.
Censors? I think that, if I remember correctly, that's the one that, I didn't write it down here, I'm going by memory. It's not that usually always a good thing, but anyway. That was one of those words that was hard for them to translate exactly what it was. So some translations translated as knives, some translated it as something else. All right, verse 10. 30 gold basins, 410 silver basins of a similar kind, and 1,000 other articles. And I'll go ahead and read verse 11 since we're almost there anyway. All the articles of gold were 5,400. Sounds like a bunch. A lot of pieces of articles.
Brother James, on the New Living Translation, verse 9 says, instead of knives, silver incense burner.
It's one of those ancient words that they had trouble figuring out exactly what it was. So they had trouble, I guess it got translated from that language to English. Anyway, there's some problems with that for some reason. But you got a list of a lot of stuff. Now, I want you to notice that, okay, something doesn't quite match. Verse 10. Well, when you total all that stuff up, by the way, and you look at verse 11, it says that there were 5,400. Well, if you total up what they've got in the previous verses, you don't come to 5,000. You don't compute, shall we say. Any of you have a clue as to why that might not compute?
Some of the people might have some of the articles that they give later.
Could have. What's another theory? We can go theories all, because that's about all we got right here.
Well, it says the articles of gold and silver were
Yep.
5,400. It may be that he wasn't trying to give an exhaustive list, but rather, like it says at the end of verse 10, and 1,000 other articles, doesn't necessarily mean that those articles were even of gold or silver.
Right.
So,
That's the most accepted idea or thought, is that everything was not actually listed. It is also thought that maybe it did in the first verse, these were just the main things, maybe the larger things, and there were a lot of smaller things that were included in then verse 11. We don't know exactly, but we can safely say this. There's a bunch of stuff there, right? You know, and this wasn't cheap stuff. A lot of this stuff's gold and silver. So this is not cheap stuff at the very least. And Cyrus just simply gave it back to them. They took with them. Okay. Any questions, comments on chapter 1? One more thing you're gonna see I'm gonna do here in just a moment.
Okay, I'm gonna be the dumb one. What were all these things used for?
These were things that were used in the temple. They could have included candlesticks, basins for the platters for the bread, basins for water that was used for purification, all of that kind of stuff.
But it seems a lot for those purposes. I mean,
Yep.
I say paper plates, so.
Or here's what you
I
got.
can't see needing that many.
Well, here's what you got to remember. They were using them for the entire nation of Israel's use in the temple. So there was a lot of stuff that had to be used.
They don't mention some of the more prominent pieces, though, like the
They don't.
candlestick, the
Right.
ark.
Right. They don't mention those. You're absolutely right. Not sure why. Some believe by this point, by the way, the ark had actually been, shall we say, misplaced. They weren't really sure where it was. Okay. I'm not going to promise I'm going to do this every chapter, but I'm going to try to do this for most of the chapters. You might say, well, okay, that was well and good for all the stuff going. Now, what's the application for us today? That's what I want to try to do, each of these chapters. Like I said, some of these chapters, the way they are, that might be a little hard to do, but I think we'll come up with something. So real quick, here's the first application. This showed that God's power is sovereign. Was what God wanted to get done in getting them back to their homeland, was it going to get done?
Yes, because he had the power.
And because he had the power to get that done. Did he use somebody to get it done? He used somebody to correct the people, right? Which was who? Nebuchadnezzar, 70 years of captivity. So what we need to understand even today, is God's work going to get done? It is going to get done. So if that's something you're going to be a part of, that's good. But it's going to get done. You got to remember, God keeps his promises. Did he give the nation of Israel a promise 70 years prior to this? Yes, he did. He told them, you're going to be there 70 years, and then you're going to leave. Now, the ones that left, remember, 70 years. Who do you think, or what age do you think, maybe that's not even the best way to put it. Let me rephrase that. The ones that went back, What percentage of those do you think actually remember the area they're going to?
Probably hardly anybody.
Probably, you're right, probably very few. Because by this point, 70 years later, if you were alive during the captivity and brought into Babylon and now still Persia, you got to be well over 70 years old, right? And at this day and time, was that pretty old? That's pretty old. That's pretty old even still, right? But with all our modern technology and medicine and so forth, and I can say that because I'm getting real close to that. I can say that. But so more than likely, bottom line is more than likely, most of these that are going back have never seen this land. Now, some of them apparently did.
Some of them did because they had tears later on when they finally had it.
Yeah, some of them did. But there are a lot of them that went back, probably never saw it. But God made a promise. He keeps his promises. And he's going to accomplish his purpose. What was the purpose of getting them back to their homeland? We mentioned this, I think, last week.
Bring Jesus into the world.
Exactly. That was it. Because Jesus was going to be born where? In Bethlehem. In order to have him born in Bethlehem, they had to get back there. And this is a long time before that happened. Okay? But he had a plan. And it was going to get done. And today, God works in the world through providence. Does God perform miracles today? No, that age was over with the apostles back that time of them. But he does work through providence. I'll tell you this short, or at least I'll try to make it short, story. This has to do with about me. It was providence that got me here. Let me explain. I had a job in Missouri teaching. I'd fed up to, no, even higher. I was fed up completely with that job. At the new members dinner the other night, question came up, how many had ever quit a job without having another one? Guess whose hand went up? I was a teacher at a school. I quit my job. I did not have another job. I was basically the only one working. Trish had a job as she was a pharmacy tech, but it definitely wasn't going to pay the bills. I looked all over the state pretty much of Missouri because that's where I was at the time, looking for a job. Got no offers, as the song goes. Nothing. Trish has a cousin who happens to live still here in Huntsville. She wanted us to come here to try out to ask for the schools here. I applied to Huntsville City and Madison County. Both of them said, we ain't got anything, but you can fill out the application. I filled out the applications. Now, by this time, it's already summertime. After I quit my job. We sold our house. That's another story. I'm not going to go there. We were living in a rental house. I happened to be in Huntsville for something totally unrelated to education. Got a call from Trish back in Missouri. She stayed in Missouri. Said, guess what? There's a principal at some school called Buckhorn that wants to talk to you. I went to interview with him, and as they say, the rest is history. That was over 30-something years ago. Now, was I supposed to come to this area? Apparently. I ended up getting a decent job that paid better than the one where I came from, even though the cost of living also doubled. That even each other out. But anyway, I was a deacon up there. Moved up. I don't know if it's a move up or move down. Really, sometimes since as an elder, I'm not sure which it is. But anyway, providence. So do I believe in providence? Yeah. I didn't even know this part of the country existed at that point. But God does work through providence. And I also want us to notice details are important. Notice in this, okay, come back up. There we go. In this list, the writer has painstakingly gone through here and listed how many different items there are and so forth. So many hundreds of this, so many hundreds of this. Are there people that in the church today that do, shall I say, the detail stuff that are important?
Yes.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of those. People that take care of the communion and getting it ready. People that take care of all the little jobs for us. The service, like we just got through in there. Oh, there's a bunch of people behind the scenes to make sure that all that stuff gets taken care of. All the little things that are happening on a daily basis with helping people in the community, helping people in the church, and so forth. And a lot of the names of those individuals you don't really know. Are they all important? Yes. Sometimes, the elders are, looked at as, well, no, we're definitely not the most important. Y'all could get by very well without, me being gone or whatever. I was gone for a while. Things just kept on going anyhow because of all those people that took care of the detail stuff. So they're very, very, all those other individuals that sometimes don't get very much, if any, recognition are very important. Okay. Questions, comments before we hit chapter 2?
I was thinking about the fact that these are like the treasures of the Lord's house.
Mm-hmm.
And we're the treasures of the Lord's house now.
Very good. Yes. We sure are. Yep.
And also, you can add on there, everything that belongs to the Lord still belongs to the Lord. No matter
Still belongs to the Lord. Yep. Yep. Very good. All right.
Did you ever think they're going back and it's gotta get out, they got all this stuff that's valuable, and there was not, they weren't molested on the way. So I took care of them so that
Yep.
there were no land pirates that
Yep.
attacked them.
They got back with everything. Yeah. That's.
Remember, some of these basins, the basins held, what, 250 gallons of water?
Yep.
The
They're
city
huge.
held, what, 12,000?
Yeah. Yeah. These things weren't just a little pan that I can carry under my arm. Some of these things were huge.
They're not having it all easy, so
Pardon?
there's somebody's talking about how having it sound like all easy when they get
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. There was nothing easy
that deep.
about carrying these things back.
I mean, when they get there, it's right there.
But they got it all back. Just like during the time after Exodus, and when they got the tabernacle, they had to carry that thing around everywhere, and that was no easy task either. Okay, chapter 2. All right. Chapter 2, we're probably going to cover pretty quickly here. At least I'm certainly going to try. And mainly because, I'm sorry, but there is no way I'm going to read the list of all those names. What I'm going to basically do, put these in groups so that you understand who these people basically group-wise were. Because if I were to read the names, I'm going to butcher about 99% of them, the names, plus the fact that nobody's going to remember them later. So, here we go with chapter 2. It starts off, now these are the people of the province who came back from the captivity of those who had been carried away, from whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away to Babylon, who returned to Jerusalem and Judah, everyone to his own city. And then in verse 2, it starts listing people. All right. Verse 2. The first group that's mentioned are the leaders. Now, remember that guy that got all these treasures from the Persian treasurer earlier that I said, no, I'm going to butcher his name? Start with S. Anyway.
Oh, Shabbat.
Yeah, him. As we look at this list, and I'm not going to read the list, but as you look at that list of the leaders, is he in the list? No, he's not in the list. Okay? I'll save you the struggle there. He's not in the list. It lists several other people, but notice who the first person that's listed in verse 2. Zerubbabel. That is one name I will mention. Now, that one, I learned how to pronounce that one when I was a kid. So, anyway, Zerubbabel is listed first as what? He's called what? Those who came with Zerubbabel, well, I'm sorry, that doesn't actually, but basically what it's saying is they came with him. So what does that make it sound like he is? It sounds like he's the leader. That's my point. Here it looks like Zerubbabel is the leader. Okay? Now, the other guy's name is not even mentioned. So if he was a prince or leader of some kind, why isn't he listed here?
He's the same guy, I'm sorry. He's the same guy.
He may be the same guy. That is a little evidence for that. Yeah, I understand it. Maybe the same guy.
Here that name was, could have been Babylonian.
Could have been. Could have been.
They give some reasons for it, but anyway,
But,
they did change names.
oh, they did. They did. But he's not listed. He will be listed again later. Okay? That guy's starts with S anyway. I keep trying to have trouble saying. But Zerubbabel is mentioned here. Zerubbabel's name's going to be listed again. But these were the leaders. So the first group you got listed there are basically the leaders. Okay? Second group. These are the laymen. Now, even in our society today, especially when you're talking about a specific religious group, you have two large groups. They're either the laymen or the what? Clergy. Okay? So in this case, the clergy would be what tribe? The Levites. And if you're not a Levite, you are a what? Layman. So the group that's the layman, which starts basically at the end of verse 2 and goes all the way through to verse 35. And again, no way I'm going to do that. These are a group of the laymen. So as you look through this list, notice that these are those that are not priests. They're not part of the priesthood or any connection with Levites at all. That goes all the way through, as I said, verse 35. One more thing I was going to mention. Let me see it real quick here. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Let's go back to verse 2, and there was somebody's name I wanted to mention. In verse 2, you notice a guy's name by the name of Mordecai is listed. Anybody ever heard of him? Nope, sorry, you had it. Wrong. Because that's wrong, Mordecai. I know what you're thinking. It's the Mordecai and Esther. But no, it wasn't. That was a different Mordecai that was in Esther. According to the research that I did. That first time I saw that, I said, well, I think I heard that guy. Nope. As is some of these others. They're different individuals. Okay. So that gets us all the way through verse 35. Then verse 36 through 58, now we've got listed the priests, the Levites, and the temple servants. Who was a temple servant?
Levites, temple servants.
They were.
I don't know that's gatekeepers, huh?
Yeah, okay. So who would have been the temple servants we're talking about here? These would have been individuals that more than likely were slaves, either voluntarily or involuntarily, that were put to work in the temple. Were there a lot of chores that needed to be done in the temple? Oh, there's a ton of stuff that had to be done in the temple. And they got servants to take care of those. So that's who they were. But they're listed in 36 through 58. And there's the fourth group. This group is kind of an interesting group. In verses 59 through 63, they list the people that were essentially, now remember, all these are going back to Israel. We're going back to their homeland. All of these were individuals who didn't have the proper documentation to prove who they were. They were either not Israelites to begin with, or they were proselytes in some way, but not in the way that they could prove it, and so forth. But it said basically that they didn't have the proper documentation. As you read down through, I'm going to kind of paraphrase some of this. One of the things that they could do to get permission to be not part of this group, but part of maybe the layman group, was to have approval by use of the Urim and Thummim that was part of what the high priest would have. Now, the Urim and Thummim was two stones that were on put behind the breastplate of the high priest. And they used those to get basically orders from or make choices and so forth, or that to put something before God to get, and how that actually worked, I really don't know. That was the only way that this group that didn't have the documentation could move up to this group that did have. There was only one problem with that. Can you guess what the problem was?
They had a high priest.
That was one problem. That was one problem. But there was another problem. That was even if they'd had the high priest, there was another problem.
They had the Urim and
They had lost them. Urim and Thummim had been lost. So it's kind of like saying, guess what? The only way you can get this done is to get a judge to sign off on it. And you say, okay, point me to a judge. We don't have any.
Basically, nobody in authority.
Yep.
Gooses and goose.
So, So in this case, the Urim and Thummim had been lost, so that was the only way they could lose this status of being without documentation. So they just had to stay that way. Now, did they go back? Yes, they did. What they actually did, I don't know. But apparently they fit in somewhat.
In verse 62, he sought their register, this King James, says at the end, therefore were they as polluted from the priesthood? I think they were trying to get into the priesthood, so they could still be people within, right?
Yeah. They could still go back with them. But but they couldn't be part of the priesthood, or they couldn't be. Not only could they not be part of it, but they couldn't worship in the temple.
They were considered defiled.
They were considered defiled. They couldn't worship in the temple, but they went back anyhow.
Maybe they cast lots.
Well, yeah, that wasn't what they could do.
But that's all they knew.
Yeah.
They had to go. They went with what they knew.
They went back anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like going back. I know it's the first bell, and at least I got through chapter 2. I was going to try 3. I knew if I said that at the beginning, y'all just laugh at me. But think of it this way. And I had a thought there about, they got to participate and live with them, even though they didn't have all the credentials they needed to actually fit in. Oh, I know what it was. What's always surprised or impressed me, the Ethiopian eunuch that was baptized. He had traveled there to worship at the temple. To worship. What was kind of interesting about that?
Court of the Gentiles was as far as he could go.
The what?
Court of the Gentiles was.
The court of the Gentiles was as far as he could go. He couldn't actually go in court of the women or any of the other courts to actually worship. It was basically like trying to watch a baseball game from the parking lot. It's kind of a rough scenario there. I mean, example there, but that's kind of what it was like. That's without the TV and everything to help you out. But he went anyway. He traveled all that distance and he went anyway. It's always impressed me.
Don't they say that the Ark of the Covenant, some of the so-called churches in Ethiopia have the Ark of the Covenant?
That's a claim they make, yeah.
The claim?
Yeah, but they also have it so guarded and nobody's allowed to look in it, so. Anyway. All right. In verses 64 and 67 through 67, we have the totals. And it totals the animals and the people and so forth that went. There are a lot of animals in there. Okay. In verses 68 through 70, they have arrived. So, it sounds like a quick trip, right? More like that wasn't a very quick trip, really, was it? All right, but they have arrived, and notice what the first thing they do once they have arrived. What do? They offer things to the temple. They gave to the treasury, verse 69. According to their ability, they gave to the treasury for the work of 61,000 gold drachmas and a bunch of other stuff. And they seem to have a pretty good celebration. Verse 70. So the priests and the Levites, some of the people and the singers, the gatekeepers, the Nephilim, dwelt in the cities, and all Israel in their cities. So when they got there, they went to their own cities. Now, I guess the first question I would wonder is, if they'd never been there before, how do they know which city to go to? But apparently there was enough of the older ones, or at least they got enough information from the older ones before they left.
Were raised?
Pardon?
Do you know where your grandparents were raised?
More or less.
More or less, you could have got there.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the
Same idea. The information was given.
They would have been told about.
They would have been told multiple times.
They would have been told about Israel. They would
Yes.
have been told about
Yes.
what it was like.
They would have.
Made it because when they built the new temple, they had remembrance of what it looked like, the former one.
Yeah, and which we were hoping that we were going to get into chapter 3, but it doesn't look like we're going to now because now I know we've got much less than 5 minutes. Okay, so let's look at the application this time. This one's simple. That's the only application I got. They went home. Okay. Apply that today. You ever been somewhere for some length of time away from home? What's the most precious place you think of trying to get to? Home.
Isn't that what we're trying to do now?
And same thing for them. They were home. They got to go home. Now, whether that's just us, whether we're living here and we go vacation for a while and come back to home, or the home that we are going to go to eventually, like is said many, many times, this is not our home. Eventually, we're going to our real home, which is going to be in heaven. So, they got to go home. All right, questions, comments, anything?
I've got one.
Okay.
In verse 2, we're talking about 2 being the leaders.
Mhm.
They needed to know all these people because they wouldn't know where Jesus would come from if they didn't keep the record.
Yeah, that goes back to what we said from the first chapter about the details. Yeah. That was one thing about this. It is meticulously kept its detail of people who actually went back, which was their record. Exactly like you said, it's their good record of who was there.
They got an actual claim that Jews actually had used their ancestry up the last 200 years ago.
Yes.
200 years they counted off. But then they used
They do. Well, we will begin chapter 3 next week, instead of this week. So.